The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, hi, for those of you who've joined in early, the session is about to begin in a few minutes. You can make yourself comfortable, probably, grab a cup of coffee and yes, take a notepad as well. And yes, we are going to be starting in a few minutes. Before we get into today's session, I'd like you to do me a quick little help right here. If you can hear me loud and clear and if you can see my screen clearly as well, all you got to do is just make use of the chat window to let me know the same. Wonderful. Thank you so much for the confirmation, guys. We are all set and we will be starting off in a few minutes. Thank you. Thank you so much for the confirmation. It apparently looks like a full house today. That's great news. So before we get started, I hope all of you have received my email with the resource kit that I had sent earlier today. What I've done is, along with the resource kit, I've also attached the link to a website that could help you get access to the unlimited workflow requesters. Just in case anybody has any trouble understanding how it works or how the licensing works, you can always drop me a mail or just drop me a message in chat right now, and I'd be more than happy to help you out on that front as well. So, So yes, we are all set, and yes, a very good afternoon. Thank you for having taken the time to have joined me in today's session. This is Jay, product expert from the AD Solutions team here at Manage Engine. First things first, before we get into today's presentation. Yes, for those of you who want a copy of today's presentation, drop me a message towards the end of the webinar with your email address, and I'd be more than happy to share with you the video. For those of you who have questions coming up during the session, feel free to shoot your questions then and there. I take them as and when they come. Just in case if I miss one or two questions, don't worry at all. I'll have them taken towards the end of the session, and that's a promise. So yes, we are in the fourth day of the 5-day workshop series for AD Manager Plus. And what are we going to talk about today? This topic, actually, as a matter of fact, is a very interesting one. We will be talking about something that all administrators would always want to do, which is delegate work. So, here, the difference between doing it through the native way and doing it through the AD Manager Plus way is what we are going to try and understand. So, through the session, we will go on to understand how Active Directory delegation works through AD Manager Plus. And yes, as a matter of fact, we'll also be talking about the IT services management aspects of the AD Manager product. What am I talking about right here? So we've taken the best of both worlds. We've brought in elements of IT services management into AD Manager Plus. All right. What am I talking about right here again? It's the workflow in AD Manager Plus, or multiple business workflow as we'd like to call. So today's session is primarily going to focus on two important aspects in the product. Number one is going to be AD delegation, or Active Directory delegation. And as a matter of fact, the delegation that we'll be doing through AD Manager Plus today will be a non-invasive or a non-intrusive delegation. So hold on to that thought. During the course of the webinar, I'll explain as to why it's non-invasive or non-intrusive. And yes, again, workflow as well. So a quick recap on what we saw last week, the first three sessions. We started off by understanding user identity provisioning. We started off by figuring out as to how to use AD Manager Plus to create users in Active Directory. And we also remember that we did not stop with just Active Directory. We went on to do it across platforms. So that was the best point about the integration and about the 360-degree user provisioning that we offer. All right. The second session, we went on to discuss about managing the Active Directory, the users who were onboarded to your system. So we went on to figure out how to use modification templates. We went on to do basic modifications to attributes and how simple that could get. Yes. And the third session, which was the last session last week, we were talking about script-free Active Directory reporting. And we went on to discuss close to 10 different use cases, the solid ones that most of us would definitely want to run day in, day out. We discussed them and figured out as to how they could be useful. Reports was the topic for the last week or the last session. And yes, not forgetting the custom report functionality, which is the game changer when it comes to Active Directory reporting. A report functionality that will let you create your very own tailor-made report. Yes, your very own tailor-made report for any AD attributes in the specific way that you want. So that's a quick recap on what we saw in the first three sessions. If any one of you has missed out any of those sessions, just drop me a message right now. I'll have your email ID noted and I'll send across the video for that specific session. All right, that shouldn't be a problem. So today's session, again, like I told you, is going to be on AD delegation and Active Directory workflow management. So here's the agenda for you. So we'll start off by understanding how to set up Active Directory delegation through AD Manager Plus. So that's the first task that we'll be doing. We'll be going further to also dig deep into the AD delegation module that we have, where we'll be able to, enforce restrictions for employees or IT help desk technicians having access to specific roles. So you'd not want all your help desk technicians to have all permissions in Active Directory. That's not something that we come across very often. So you would have a set of offerings that you'd want to have your help desk technicians to have, by which I mean to say, you as the administrator would want complete control over your Active Directory, and you definitely not want all of them to have access to your Active Directory directly. So that's where the product steps in, lets you get granular, lets you create policies, lets you have those roles assigned to specific technicians, and also, as a matter of fact, keep track of who's done what through the product. All right, so it's going to be a holistic approach towards Active Directory management that we're taking today. And then later we'll also be talking about workflow, which is going to help you create a dashboard. So when I say dashboard, we all get excited by dashboards, don't we? And especially when it comes to a dashboard for the HR to kind of offload your work, that's something that you definitely want to have it in place. So here, when it comes to your stakeholders in the organization, it could be your HR, it could be your line manager, it could be your end user, anybody in your organization. It's always going to be the end users making requests for Active Directory changes. And especially if it's the HR, the kind of requests that they keep making through the day. So we not want to burden ourselves with so many requests. Instead, why not transfer the burden, at least a part of it, to the actual stakeholder who's making the request? So that is the idea. What we'll do today is we'll use the workflow module to create a simple user-friendly console from where the HR or any executive or a non-IT person can make simple requests, which are, as a matter of fact, intelligent as well. I'll tell you why intelligent during this session. All right, that is the second point that we'll be discussing today. Going further, we'll be getting granular, having restrictions made based on organization units, having restrictions made based on your filters that you set, yes, and also, as a matter of fact, get into the hierarchy as to how the workflow actually flows, from who gets the ticket and how is this working in the background. So it's going to be an all-in-all session on workflow and Active Directory delegation. So that is a quick roundup on what to expect from today's session. So without any delay, quickly getting into the product and starting off today's session. Just in case if you do not have an instance running at this point in time, but then you still want to try out the features, what I'm going to quickly do is 3, 2, 1, and on your chat right now. So that's going to be the URL for you to get in, get in the practice mode. You can try out the product from demo.admanagerplus.com. You can try logging in as the administrator. And in today's session, since we'll also be talking about handling the product from a technician point of view, you might as well try the technician login that's available. All right, so for those of you who don't have a working instance, you can try this. So getting back to the product, the first 3 sessions we were discussing about Active Directory management. Under this tab we were discussing about user creation, which is the first phase of the user life cycle, which is user provisioning. Then we went on to talk about user modification, where we saw how to configure modification templates, have them modified as per your requirement, and a bulk of other actions as well. Things like restoring users from deletion and all that. So last week, the last session was on Active Directory reporting. We saw user reports, group reports, password reports, in fact Office 365, and permissions or security reports as well. So today we'll be discussing about another 2 important modules. One is going to be the AD delegation module, and the next one is going to be the workflow module. So here, getting into AD delegation module. All right, what do we have right here? The AD delegation module is going to let you create a simple set of roles, and in these roles you'll get to assign the set of tasks that a specific technician can perform. And when I say help desk roles, We've already got a list of roles pre-configured in my environment, and you can very well create your own roles. So that's the benefit that we are discussing today. Help desk roles. So the first fundamental requirement to get your delegation done is the creation of help desk roles. And again, help desk roles are going to be the list of actions that a specific technician can get his hands on. All right. I already have a help desk role configured for the sake of time. I'm going to quickly get into that specific help desk role and show you how it works. So here we've got a basic help desk role. It says help desk technician role. All right, what do we have right here? So under the delegation module, we are able to see that there's a specific tab for Active Directory management. Wonderful. We've got a tab for Active Directory reporting and one for administration. So many a times you would not want your technicians to be doing administrative level actions for Active Directory. So it would be just AD management and AD reports for which you'd be granting access. And here for this specific role, what I've done is I've just granted basic access. So I've configured user creation, user modification, and yes, of course, the technician can also have access to user modification and creation templates. So these are the basic actions I've configured when it comes to user management. Do we stop right there? Not really. So when it comes to modification, you can still get granular and say which attributes have to be associated with a specific role. If you want a technician to be just able to reset passwords and unlock users, you can select those and leave the rest of them blank. If you want to go still further, fine grained, and you want to stop or restrict at an attribute level, all you have to do is just expand the selection right here and say what attributes can be modified which way. So if your technician can only enable or disable this option, you can have that checked. If you want them to have the provision to alter every aspect of an attribute, you can also do that. So what do we have right here is a simple dashboard from where you can customize the list of actions that a technician can have access to. Here, user creation, modification both in single and bulk, and access to templates are selected. Likewise, I can go to the other options. Computer management, contact management, group management could be a great functionality. You can let your technicians instantaneously add users to a group or remove users from a group, create a group, remove a group. All of that is going to be possible. When it comes to your mailbox management, that could be another helpful feature, especially when it comes to file server permission management. When the help desk technician receives a request for modifying the NTFS permissions, they can act upon that right away when this option is enabled. For the benefit of today's session, to keep it simple, I'm just going with the user management actions. I definitely want you to go on and try the other features as well, because they are very functional and in fact, as a matter of fact, helpful at the same time. I've selected the basic user management features right here. All right, going further, I'm also going to grant this specific help desk role a few reports right now. And when it comes to reports, I just want to stick with the basics right here. I'm going with the account status reports, the ones that every help desk technician would use on a regular basis. Something like a report for inactive users, a report for users whose passwords are going to expire pretty soon, just so that they can generate a quick report, have the users whose passwords are going to expire notified, and save themselves off help desk tickets. So that's the idea. You can specify the list of reports. You can again go granular and just grant those critical reports or the basic helpful reports that could make the help desk technician's job a lot easier. I've selected these reports: the inactive users report, locked out users report, recently account expired users report, and soon to expired users report. You can also go dig deep, get into the other reports for passwords, for groups, for file server permissions, and all of that and a lot more. I'm going to quickly go ahead and save this role. So what have we done right here? We are done with the first step of the process of delegation. We've created a help desk role. Again, just giving you a brief as to what a help desk role is. It's a set of tasks that can be performed by a help desk technician. So you're stating out the definition as to what the set of tasks can be under a name. Once that's done, what's the next obvious step? you'll have to get it assigned to a technician. So you have a role has to be assigned to a technician. So that's the next obvious step. So again, here I've got a technician configured for a specific role, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to still show you how to get this done. So you can always go right here. It says add a new technician. All right, let me see what that does. Okay, so I have a console from where I can pick a user or a group. Wonderful. So that's where I'd want to start. I'd want to pick a technician to who I'd want to assign a role. It's going to be the IT help desk technician. Lovely, I've picked the user. Right, the next thing that I'd want to do is I've created a role. All right, I've mapped a role. I'd want to have that assigned to that specific technician. So going further, the help desk technician role is going to be assigned to the corresponding help desk technician. Done. And here comes the most useful feature where you can restrict the access to perform an AD management action. You want this specific technician to have access to the entire organization, you can go all OUs. Let's say you want this technician to have access only to your office at New York. If that's your requirement, I can say employees America NYC. That's the only OU for which this specific technician with this specific role will have access to perform AD management actions. All right, so I hope this is pretty straightforward and clear. You create a role, you pick a technician, you assign the role, you set a restriction. Simple as that. Just a three-step simple process. And it doesn't stop right there. You can either do it at a technician level as an individual or do it for an entire group. So this serves to be a lot more useful when you're delegating actions to your entire IT department. So there could always be those common management actions that every member of your IT department should be and would be able to perform. All right, so you can very well go ahead and select the corresponding group. Or if it's the HR for who you're granting certain access in Active Directory, you can select the entire group and get going. All right, so we've got the technician right here, we've got the role also assigned right here. Before I proceed any further, I want to take a moment, stop right there, highlight this one feature which is the game changer. So I've got a checkbox that says impersonate as admin. How exactly is this feature going to be useful? When you do your delegation through the delegation of control wizard in Active Directory, the biggest problem that you have is one, you have to go granular, attribute after attribute, get it set. And keeping track of what access was given to which user to perform what task could be a very big challenge. So I'm guessing not many of us would be big fans of the delegation of control wizard. What is the best alternative, or what's the next best alternative? What if I tell you, you necessarily need not grant any of your technicians any access in Active Directory, but still get them to perform AD management tasks, but still give them the power to perform AD management tasks without actual access to Active Directory. So your Active Directory remains intact, your Active Directory remains secure because it's just one administrator or a few group of administrators who are going to have access, and then a ton of other help desk technicians and other resources in your organization still getting to perform actions but without actually having direct access. So that's the idea behind impersonation. So we brought an impersonation through which a help desk technician can take the role of an administrator, or to be precise, impersonate an administrator and get the same action done. And when it comes to impersonation, this is more like a product level feature. The admin account that I'm specifying right here is the account that you use to log in into your AD Manager Plus. So the admin account should necessarily have all the required rights in Active Directory. I guess you understand the logic behind this. So now you must have a question popping up in your mind. If I say I'm granting help desk technicians access to Active Directory, and let's say they perform actions in AD, and the impersonation option is also enabled, how exactly would I be able to keep track of which technician performed what action? If I'm going to go check my Active Directory logs or event logs, all right, every single log is just going to point towards the administrator. So that's a problem when it comes to complying, when it comes to having reports submitted to your auditors. It's going to be a real big challenge. So to have that sorted out as well, we've got a very clear, concise report called as the audit reports. The moment I press audit reports, I'm able to see which technician performed what action on what object at what point in time, and every single detail till the attribute level to which object was modified. All of that is very clearly listed. So here from the audit reports, I'll be able to very clearly see which technician performed what action under what category at what point in time on what object, and a lot more. And not just that, to keep it a lot more simple, what we've done is we've also given you the provision to schedule this as a report. So every 30 days or every 15 days, you can have a report run and sent over to your email address and check which technician performed what task. So that way, you not just let them perform tasks, but still stay on top of the system with data that backs up or backs you up. All right, so auditing is not going to be a problem at all. So what we've done is we've created a help desk role. We just did that. We mapped that help desk role to a technician. All right, it's the IT help desk technician. The role is mapped, and during the course I explained that this technician will get the provision to impersonate as the admin, so that way I don't need to grant access. So the user's permission in the Active Directory will not be altered. Make changes using the admin privileges as defined in the domain settings. So that's what we're doing right here. And if in case I'd want to have more restrictions, I can always go granular, add the OUs for which the technician should have access to, restrict it to a specific OU, or grant access to an entire organization. I can do that. And then also, if I'd want to go fine grained in terms of the file servers to which the technician has to have access, I can add or remove access right here. All right. Finally, if there are certain groups that I not want the technician to modify, I can include them and exclude them right here and have them saved. All right. So the note right here is in fact a very useful message. It says all the delegations bear effect only in the product. Technicians' actual privileges in Active Directory will remain unchanged. So that is the definition of impersonation in AD Manager Plus. So we've got the role, we've got everything set. What are we waiting for? Let me quickly log out as the administrator and log in as the help desk technician to show you how different the product looks from the help desk technician point of view. Here you go. So what was such a in-depth complicated product with a lot of features and functionalities now seems to be pretty simple for the help desk technician. Just 2 tabs and just a few basic actions, nothing less, nothing more. So we've got user management right here, and all those tasks that I picked during the role creation, just those tasks are available for the help desk technician's usage. So here there's user creation, there's altering the templates, there's import, there's bulk modification, and as a matter of fact, the reports that I had configured as well. So locked out users report, the inactive users report. So I can quickly act upon any of my case right here at my will. So I can quickly run an inactive users report, check who are the inactive users. So I'm the help desk technician wanting to run a quick report on all the inactive users in my organization. Good God, I've got 500 inactive users in my organization. So there are reports that can be run, and management actions can also be performed correspondingly. So here I've got the AD management. I can do a single user creation. I can very well initiate a user creation right here. I can pick templates because I have the provision. I can onboard a user to a specific department. Let's say I want to onboard a user to a specific department, and the user is going to be Megan Fox. All right, so Megan Fox is going to be the user who's getting onboarded to the marketing department. So something that you'll have to note right here is the moment I selected the marketing department template, attributes pertaining to the marketing department have automatically gotten populated. So if you can remember and recollect our session from user provisioning, we were configuring templates for different departments, and those are the exact templates that I've put to use today. So Megan Fox is the new user getting created in this specific case that we're discussing. Every attribute from the contact tab, yes, that's set right. Exchange mailboxes, all of that configured rightly. So all I have to do is just say create user, and it's the help desk technician, mind me, not the administrator, but the help desk technician, who ideally does not have any privileges in actual Active Directory, is still getting to perform. And there you go, the user account got created, still getting to perform an AD management task. So Megan Fox has been provisioned into the marketing department with all those necessary attributes. All right, so now what was I talking about? I was talking about AD delegation and the ability to keep a track on what was happening in the organization, especially when it happens through a technician. So here, the audit report instantaneously gives me an insight into what had happened. So the IT help desk technician has performed a single user creation at this point in time, and in fact, Megan Fox is the user. The user has been successfully created, and when I say details, I'll get a complete overview of every aspect of the account: the logon name, the membership, the organization unit, department, and whatnot. So this would serve to be a comprehensive, audit report or audit trail that you can keep track of. All right. So that is the AD delegation module for you. As a matter of fact, in my personal opinion, I've spoken to a lot of administrators, and many of them have found this specific functionality to be greatly beneficial. That's because one, delegation is always fun, so it's necessarily not you doing all the work, and you have people to handhold and share work. And number two, since this is completely secure and under your control, keeping track of it is going to be no problem at all. And at any given point in time, any role that you grant can be revoked, can be disabled, can be altered. So you're under complete control. All right, so that is AD delegation for you. Actually, as a matter of fact, there's a lot more to AD delegation. Just in case if you're curious as to which technicians got what access, and if there's a report that could give you a quick overview of who's got what access, we've got something called as the technicians report under AD delegation. And this report will give you a granular level picture saying who's got the impersonate as admin option, which are the OUs for which they're delegated to perform actions, or what are the roles that are delegated to a specific technician. So again, this can be exported, this can be used for your auditing purposes as well. All right, when it comes to admin audit report, just in case if any alterations are made to a help desk role, a privilege is added, a privilege is removed, all of that is tracked right here. All right, a quick 2-minute overview. AD delegation is the module that lets you create help desk roles. The help desk roles are nothing more than mere definitions of the list of actions that you'd want a technician to have access to. The next thing that you do is assign this role to a technician, then enforce restrictions in terms of OU, in terms of the groups for which they can have access or not have access, and then you do actual task of figuring out what happens when a technician performs an action, and also keep track of what is happening in your organization. So which technician performed what action. So that was a quick overview on AD delegation. So the next topic that we're going to be talking about is the workflow module. So we're done with the first tab. The next tab is the workflow, which in fact is a very interesting tab. If you were to have understood delegation, workflow should be even more easy, because more or less a workflow and delegation have a similar logic to them. When it comes to business workflow, it takes delegation to the next level. Instead of handing over an actual privilege for a user to perform a task, what we are doing is we're just granting them the provision to make requests. All right. And these requests are going to be absolutely intelligent requests, because you're the one who's configuring dashboards for those end users. It could be your HR, it could be your line manager, it could be any of your end user. Just like delegation, the only difference is they don't get to perform an AD action, but they get to make requests for you to perform the AD action. So at a given point in time, you can have workflows set for multiple levels. If your organization has a lot of hierarchy to it, all right, there could be a requester, there could be a reviewer, one to approve it and one to execute it. That could be the flow. Or if you want to keep it real simple, if it's going to be just the requester and the executor, you can have it that way as well, just a two-step process. For those organizations that have more hierarchy, say there's a requester, there have to be two people reviewing it, two people approving it, and one to execute it. You can get that configured in your very organizational specific way as well. All right, so the first step towards using workflows to create a workflow or define the levels of workflow, you say create and you'll have the workflow popping in right here. So the default business workflow is a very straightforward one. There's one requester, there's one executor. I'm going to go with the default one or the basic one for this demonstration. So there is a default workflow, which is a requester executor workflow. Again, just like how we saw in delegation where there were delegation roles, the workflow module as well has requester roles. So the requester roles are where you get to again specify the list of actions for which a user can make requests for, your end users can make requests for. So I'm able to see a list of actions already configured right here. I can open one of those for you. I'm going to quickly open up the HR role for user creation and modification. What do we have right here? We've got the HR role for user creation and modification. So this specific role is one that I'd like to assign to my HR. All right. And this specific role has a list of actions for which the HR can make requests to. There are user management actions, there are group management actions, contact, permission, and computer management as well. But since it's the HR for who I'm granting the access, I want to configure just the basic functionalities. So the HR would want an onboarding dashboard. So user creation is selected. The HR would want to make requests for password resets. So reset password is selected. And yes, definitely have control over the account in terms of disabling the user, deleting them, or enabling them as and when needed. So all of this is just going to grant the HR with a role to make requests and nothing more. And again, like in delegation, you can go granular. You can say if the entire list of templates have to be made available, if certain provisions have to be made available, you can go granular and specify. So we're working on a lot more in terms of the workflow module, in terms of the NTFS permissions as well. We've worked in a few features already under permissions management. So a lot more is coming up in terms of workflow. Do watch out, do follow our release notes. We are having exciting features lined up in the pipeline for workflow. That was a sneak peek for you. So that being said, once the requester role is configured, all right, selecting just the basic roles for the HR, for creation, for reset password, and for account management, I'm saving the role quickly. The role is successfully updated. The next thing that I'd want to do is to assign the role to a requester. So here I've got a list of requesters. When it comes to requesters, they could be your existing help desk technicians making requests, or they could be brand new requesters altogether. And as a matter of fact, in the mail that I have written to you today, all right, there is a link that will give you access to download the unlimited license or make a request for the unlimited requesters license. So once you have that license in place, you'll be able to add unlimited number of users as requesters in your workflow module, and you can grant roles for all of those requesters to make AD requests. All right, so that's just a quick tip and heads up. We have the HR manager mapped right here to a user modification role. We've got a HR requester mapped to the HR role for user creation and modification. So how do you map a requester? You can say add new requester, select the requester. All right, it could be your HR requester. Okay, I've got a lot of HRs right here. I'm just quickly searching up for the HR requester. Select the HR requester, the corresponding user, and the corresponding role. The role is going to be the HR role for user creation and modification. I've selected that as well. And again, like delegation, you can have restrictions. So if your HR is just operating out of your New York office, you can just say this specific OU, or if you're operating out of your DC Washington office, you can say this one as well. All right. So here the HR is more like the head HR operating for the entire organization. So it's going to be all right here. So once I hit save, I'll get the provision right here. It says HR requester from this specific department having access to this specific roles. And I can always go ahead and modify, just like how I modified the delegation roles. So I can add file servers, I can remove them. I can also specify the list of templates that the HR can have access to. So when it comes to templates, since the HR is making a request for user onboarding, the user creation templates are available. If the HR has provision to modify, yes, the user modification templates can also be customized. You can just grant the HR just a few basic templates. So if you'd want the HR to just have access to a basic template and user provision, you can make this mandatory. You can make this the default one and have this one alone selected. If you want them to have access to your complete set of user creation templates, let them make an intelligent request. You can grant them access, totally up to you, or totally up to your use case. All right. So yes, we've created the first bit of the workflow by creating a role and having that role assigned to a specific technician, which is the HR in this case. So our job is done. What are we waiting for? We'll have to quickly log out from the admin console, log in as the HR and see how the portal looks right now. Logging in as the HR requester. Well, what do we have? We've got a requests dashboard. All right, so all requests made by the HR are resolved, or they have none of the requests have been made yet. So I'm getting into the create request module. From the create request module, I'm able to see that for those actions for which I had configured the requester role, I'm able to see that the HR can make not AD management actions but requests. So that's the observation that you'll have to make. So that's the difference between workflow and AD delegation. So here the HR has access to single user creation, bulk user creation, can have make requests for resetting end user passwords, disabling accounts, deleting, enabling, and all that. Just those actions for which I had granted access. Yes. So if the HR wants to make an request for single user creation, I'm selecting single user creation. The HR now has access to the list of templates that are listed right here. It could be any of the template that you want or the HR prefers. So to instantly make this request intelligent from the basic template, the HR can go for a template, department specific template. So the next second the template is selected, the request is going to become fully loaded. If the HR selects the sales, I can very well go ahead and create a user and make a request for user provisioning. All right, it's going to be Roger Federer. I guess that's the right spelling. All right, so we've got Roger Federer in place for the sales department with all those attributes right here. So just a quick recap on what the user creation templates are capable of. We're able to see all those sales related attributes being pre-populated. From the contacts tab, I'm able to see the sales department and sales head. From the membership, I'm able to see that sales officer groups are configured rightly. So this is the benefit. So one difference that you will have to note right here. All right. So the button does not say create AD user, it says create request. So we are making a request for user provisioning. Well, that's the user for Roger. All right, it could be a request for Active Directory. You can say G Suite. You can also enable Office 365 and make it a 365 or 360-degree user provisioning request. So the HR is having access to a simple dashboard. All that the HR had to do was just fill out the first name, last name, and pick the template and say create requests. That is all. So user creation request has been made successfully for the specific user Roger Federer with these details. Yes, Roger belongs to the sales department and Roger's account has not been provisioned yet. It's just a request that's been made. So it's the HR who's made the request for user onboarding. What do I do right now? Let me quickly sign out and log in back as the HR, log in back as the administrator to check if I've received the request for user provisioning from the HR. Signing out, logging in back as the administrator to check if I've received the workflow request from the HR. It's the workflow module. It's under all requests. Do I have a request? And there you go. I have a request from the HR made at this point in time for user provisioning. And there you go. You also have the details of the request. You're able to see the object, you're able to see the properties for that specific object, and in case if need be you can also modify the properties of the object and get going with the task. So here I'm just going with the request that the HR made, not altering any of it. Alright, so the user provisioning request was made by the HR. The request is still raised and it's open. I can very well go on and approve it or reject it completely under my discretion. And something that you'll have to note right here is, since it's going to be a two-level hierarchy that we're talking about in the business workflow, it was just the requester and the approver or the executor. So we can go forward and get it done straight away. So I'm saying, okay, Roger that, and say okay. All right. Moment I say okay, the account is going to get created, and there you go. Roger's account has been successfully created. Yes, and the account has been created for the sales department. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly close the ticket. Task is done. I'm saying close, deal done, and say okay. Wonderful. So the request is closed, the workflow status is closed. When the HR gets back into his console to check if the request is closed, yes, they'd see a success message right there, and I can very well see the request history as well, every aspect of it. Who made the request, who approved the request, who committed the request, and has the request been closed or is it open. And I can also, as a matter of fact, quickly look up for the object that got created right here. I've got Roger Federer with all those attributes into my Active Directory. So it's that simple. In under 5 minutes, we were able to build a simple dashboard. The HR made a request, the user also got provisioned. If we were to do it through the native way, you would have received a request from your HR in your IT services management tool or your IT service tool, like say for example your Service Desk Plus or your ServiceNow or any other ITSM tool that you currently use, and then you'll have to get going to the next platform, start working in your Active Directory. You see, have users provisioned across platforms in your Google Apps, in your Skype for Business, in your Office 365, and especially Exchange Mailbox and all of that. So there's going to be too much toggling involved at all points in time, and as a matter of fact, there could be errors that are inevitable when you do the data entry manually. So to have all of these challenges tackled at the same time, we are trying to have the whole process streamlined. We are granting the HR the provision to make the request for user provisioning, and it can't get any simpler because the template is straightforward. The HR is making the request, and what could possibly go wrong? You could just get in the request, check for its accuracy, get going, having it incorporated in your AD. All right, so that is the basic of workflow module and how a requester can have access to a specific template, to a specific dashboard, and have AD changes done. So there are more requester roles that I'd want to talk you through or walk you through today. I've got a few roles already configured. In terms of permission management, a very effective way of doing permissions management is through the workflow module. Why do I say that? So I have a specific role right here that says finance folder permissions. All right, I'm going to get into that role and show you what exactly I'm talking about right here. So the permissions management aspect of the workflow module is selected. All right. From the user management, group management actions are selected. Wonderful. When it comes to permissions management and when it's done through the requesters module, there are certain basic innate advantages. One, you can have time restricted file server permission management. So your end user can make a request for a folder permission access. Yes, and that can be time restricted as well. So if your finance manager wants two of his accountants to have access to critical corporate data, say for example a span of 2 hours, if that's the requirement, the finance manager can make a request, and what you have to do is just look into the request, approve it, and forget about it. The problem in many instances is that when it comes to file server permission management, keeping track of what access has been given to which user is the biggest challenge. You can't manually do it. So the product does the weightlifting for you. The product does all the hard work for you. It gets back, runs an automation, makes sure that that specific access is revoked automatically based on the request that was made. All right. So let me quickly log in as the finance manager to check how the finance manager's portal looks like. So the requesters, the role is mapped, finance manager is the person selected, and the role is the finance folder permissions. All right, I'm logging out and logging in as the finance manager to check how it looks. Finance manager, did I spell that right? Yes. All right, so we have a request already right there and a list of possible requests that I can make for. So now the one that I'm going to go ahead is with the folder permissions request. All right, I'm setting the folder permissions right here, making a request. This time it's going to be a request for granting, all right, access for accountants, and the request is going to be permissions. The folder is going to be a corporate data folder. It's a critical folder in my organization that the finance manager wants two of his accountants to have access to. And this corporate data folder holds details like the payroll details, the profit and loss statements, and a lot more. So it's definitely a critical folder. I'm saying okay. And if I were to be the one getting access to such a critical folder, I'd never want to let go of the access. And this is exactly where the permission and the duration come in place. So when the request is being made, it's a very specific, detailed, fine-grained request that prompts the administrator to grant just what's required. Just enough access is what we're talking about. So it could be just the read access that I'd want the users to have access to. The finance manager is making a request for the corporate data folder for just read permission and still can go granular on what the read permission should be for, just the read permission, and for a span of just 1 day. So the audit, the accountants that they're doing is just going for a span of 1 day. Therefore, the access has to be mandatorily revoked the very next day, and it's going to happen automatically because I'm making the request that way. It's a high priority request. Please do the needful. Right, for who? That's the most important thing. I can choose the user. So the accountants in my organization are Adam and Albert. So those are the two accountants for who my finance manager is making the request. Adam and Albert need access to the corporate data folder for a span of 1 day with basic permissions for just reading the data. Yes, and that's the request. The request has been created successfully. The request ID is also in place. I can always click here to check the request status. From the all requests portal, I'm able to very clearly say and see that the request is still open and raised. I can always call back the request by canceling it. That could be done. If I did any mistake, I could always cancel a request that was made. So now what's left? I'll have to log out, log in as the administrator to check if I've received the request from the finance manager. Workflow module, all requests, and there you go. I've got a request from the finance manager for granting access. What do I have to do right now? I can always edit any of these requests. I can do that. I can change the time. So it's a very critical folder, and as per organization policy, the access time limit can only be 2 hours. You can say that. You can modify that. So here I'm just going with the basic request or the actual request. You can modify the request at any point in time, alter the user, alter the data, any of that. All right, so the request is done. It's a 1-day request, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to approve of that request. I'm being good and I'm approving the request. I'm saying good to go, and I'm saying okay. So yes, the request has been executed and the status is also closed. What's yet to be executed is the revert folder permission, which is going to get executed exactly after a day's span automatically. Just in case if I want that to run right away, I can also click the run right here and ensure that the permissions are revoked right away. So if you want to keep track of all of these actions, again, we always have access to the audit reports under AD delegation that are going to give us a very clear picture as to what is happening or which request is being processed. Yes. So we just saw how a request got processed for a specific requirement. In this case, the finance manager getting the provision to make requests for critical folders and files for his subordinates. All right. So I'm going to quickly get back to the slides to give you a recap on how workflow worked. Requesters are mandatory. They get access to a dashboard. It could be an onboarding dashboard in case of an HR. It could be a permissions management dashboard in case of a finance manager, the last example that we saw. And from the dashboard, the requester can make a request. It gets forwarded to the help desk technician or to an administrator. And once it's approved, be it positive or negative, both of them are intimated and they're kept in the loop always, because notification profiles are going to help you do that. Now, if you're wondering as to how did this specific request land in this specific technician's inbox or in his bin, you can very well have that mapped from the assigning rules module that we have. So from the assigning rules module, you'll get to configure which technician gets to perform what action, or to be specific, what action has to be performed by which technician from which technician on a lot more. So here I've got a rule criteria that says if it's from this specific requester, it's got to flow to another requester or another approver or executor. All right. If it's an action, it can be action specific. If it's going to be user creation that we're talking about, or something as critical as deletion of users, it's a very critical action. So only a top level administrator should be given the provision, or in fact be notified about this request in first place. So you can configure that. You can say who's got to be assigned and how they have to be notified. All right, it can be a priority. If it's a high priority request, again, you can get it set to the top level administrator based on the subject. If the subject says reset password, you can send it to a specific requester or a specific technician who has access to that management action. You can be very specific. You can go department wise. When you go department wise, you will be able to set approvers in that corresponding department. So if it's a request from the finance team for access for a specific folder, the finance head CHRO has to look into it, approve it, and then forward it to the executor. So all of that can be done and a lot more as well, because the notifications are also available, instant notifications both over emails and SMS or text notifications are available. So you can add your own rule or use the existing basic rules that we have, modify them as per your requirement, and get going with your Active Directory management through workflow. So in my personal opinion, I've heard a lot of administrators talk to me about the workflow requesters module, and now that the requester roles are absolutely free, or you can have unlimited number of requesters through the link that I had already shared, you can go on, add as many number of users, get to the requester roles, configure whichever requester permission that you want, and have them assigned to those users. So one quick example that I can tell you is password reset request. If your end users want to do that, they can make a request for password reset. There's a lot more. I have a role that's called what more role. So I'd want to get into that and show you what's more. So I have reset password, disable users, adding to group, removing from group. Requests can be made by users. So it's more like a subscription. If a user wants to get subscribed to a group in an organization, and when this option is enabled, they can make a request for a group subscription. All right, they want to be removed from a group, they can do that. Similarly, if there are mailboxes that have to be disabled, that can be done. Auto reply settings have to be enabled, you can do that as well. Custom scripts can be run for computers. And contact management, especially when it comes to your operations managers, they'd have big time or big trouble communicating into the help desk technicians, having contacts created, having contacts modified, because vendors keep changing all the time. So all of that and a lot more can be performed through this module that I just walked you through. All you have to do is just get going, get it configured, and just in case you have any queries, you can always drop me an email. I'd be more than happy to assist. So we were talking about dashboard accesses for different users. This is a sample dashboard and a request being made for user management, a dashboard for user provisioning through user creation templates, secure permissions management. It's a time restricted permission management, simple and secure. All right, we got to specify who gets the access, pinpoint the access, pinpoint the time, say the description, set the activity intensity. Yes. And especially for groups, again, you can go with the same flow, say which user has to get access to which group, make a request, simple secure resource access through groups. And when it comes to vendor contact management, your operations staff can create contacts, modify them, and make requests for a lot more. So it does not stop right here. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to build a holistic system. So all these exclusive AD management tasks, we are finally trying to bring all of that to your help desk console, to your IT service management tool. So why do unnecessarily toggle between multiple products? We've got integrations with Service Desk Plus and ServiceNow at this point in time. We also have multiple other integrations coming up with all the top ITSM vendors. So at this point in time, we are supporting user creation, which is onboarding, deprovisioning, and account management as well from within your corresponding help desk tool. So once the integration is set up, you necessarily need not toggle between applications, but still perform all of those actions, make requests in your Service Desk Plus, have those requests sorted in your Service Desk Plus or your Service Now, and get going with your tasks. All right. So to simplify things still further, there's the automation module that's around that could have your user onboarding process simplified, your user cleanup as well completely simplified. And for all of you who are OCD about setting up automations, you'd not want to be having an automation that runs all by itself. You'd want to have a check on it. Yes, you can have automations configured and enable workflow there as well. What am I talking about here? I have a onboarding workflow. I can implement a business workflow right here, and the user onboarding is going to be automatic, but it's going to take my approval before it gets incorporated in AD. Likewise, if I'm doing a cleanup, an Active Directory cleanup that removes all the stale accounts in my AD, I can do that automatically, but also have a workflow implemented. So every time when the automation runs, it's not going to be perfectly automated or fully automated. It's going to take my approval and then perform the last bit of execution. So that as well is covered. We give you complete control, so you can set your own policies. So I like to personally call it the essential toolkit for effective AD management. Just in case you don't have a copy of the product, just drop me a mail and get you a download link to the product. Thank you once again for being such a wonderful audience. This is Jay, your presenter for the day, signing off for the day. In case you have any questions coming up, I'm available at the chat right now to take all your questions. Thank you. Yes, of course, the video is available. What you have to do is just leave your email address right here, and I'd be more than happy to send you over the video.